As you all know, this is the third in a series of gatherings that we are sponsoring as we uh, already are celebrating our 50th anniversary for Maryknoll Lay Missioners. We started off in August with a panel that directed us to talk about and think about nonviolence and the way in which those panelists who are connected in different ways with Maryknoll Lay Missioners are already living out and implementing nonviolence, very energizing and helped us to focus on as we go forward. In October, we then wanted to emphasize our returned missioners uh, by way of also highlighting Josie and Frank Kuda, who received the Spirit of Mission Award. And we were able, through our media, to highlight what so many of you returned missioners are still doing by way of living out mission after returning to your lives here in the States. And so today we are going to be focused on youth and young adults in mission through Maryknoll Lay Missioners. I can think of no better group that really personifies for us the past, the present, and the future for mission and Maryknoll Lay Missioners. So thank you again for making the time to be here today so that we can engage this group of panelists today. And I'm very pleased to welcome Karen to facilitate today's discussions. For those of you who might not know Karen, who's very famous with our Maryknoll Lay Missioners, as she has helped to facilitate many of an event. But Karen I can never say it correctly, Karen, I'm so sorry. Karen Bortvedt Estrada is a returned Maryknoll Lay Missioner herself. She was in the orientation class of 2013 and served with the Deaf Development Program in Cambodia. Her official role there was as the communication coordinator, supporting the many projects of the deaf community. Some of her favorite aspects of the job were assisting as a Cambodian sign language interpreter for English language spaces. She supported the development of a deaf news channel, and she facilitated workshops with the staff and community. And many of us also know her from her 5 years as the recruitment and relationship manager for MKLM. Now, Karen runs her own business as a somatic stress release practitioner, supporting others in their healing journey through one-on-one sessions. She gives a free weekly practice space, workshops, and retreats. You can find out more about her current work or join the free centering Sunday practices at wishyouKnew.net. So without further ado, I turn this over to Karen.
Thank you so much, Elvira. And you always say you can't say my last name, and then you say it perfectly. So
that middle one,
I appreciate
Estrada,
that.
I got.
It is great to see all of you. Thank you for the opportunity to gather. And I want to take an opportunity to introduce our panelists or have them introduce themselves. So I'm going to put in the chat what we're going to have them say, but we're looking for your name, where and when you served, general summary of the work you did, and where you are currently and what you're up to, as a number of you are returned missionaries or have been back for a while. So thank you so much for being here to share.
My name is Abby Belt. I was a Maryknoll missioner in the fall of 2018 until July 2021. I came to it in a transitional period coming out of college, so I was young. I think I was the youngest person in our class who went over, and I elected at the very brave age of 22. Yeah, I was 22 when I made this decision that going to Haiti as one of the first Maryknoll Lay Missioners, that was a great idea. So that's where I was. I worked in several different ministries. So I was one of the lucky crew who got to experience COVID in a different place in the world. I started off in education ministry. So in the mornings, I would work in a parochial school in teacher formation, helping them with stuff like that. Post-COVID, I worked as an interim PE teacher. In the afternoon, I worked in data analytics for a women's scholarship program called Mercy Beyond Borders. So it was really cool to partner with them and help them in the capacities that I did. During COVID, I worked alongside one of my best friends from Maryknoll in making about 900 masks on a treadle sewing machine and the agronomy center. So working with plants, which is funny when you're not a green thumb. God humbles you. What I'm doing now, I'm actually in transition period again. I'm moving out of education and we'll be moving into something called instructional design for the corporate side. So that's where I'm at. I love what I do, always busy, but continue to be blessed by all of that. So.
Hi, I'm Cortney Freshwater. I was in Abby's class. So I served in Bolivia from 2019 to 2022, I think. I don't remember how old I was. I think I was like 28 or something. I started off volunteering at Hogar San Jose, which is a home for abandoned elderly. And a lot of what I did there was accompaniment. So I would just kind of show up and listen and spend time with the abuelas, and then also just do whatever I was asked to do. And then the other part of my day was working at La Casa de los Niños, which was a community as well as a school, and it had a bakery. It kind of was a community of all trades. But I worked in the school and taught a group of 5 kids with special needs. And once COVID hit and Hogar San Jose kind of shut down to outside volunteers and visitors, I really kind of went full time into La Casa de los Niños and really integrated myself into that community. I ended up moving there and living in the community alongside the people I worked with. And also during COVID, when everything kind of shut down, Juan Gomez and myself started kind of a food program, a food ministry for a few months while everything was kind of shut down. I currently live in Worcester, Ohio, and I'm still in education, teaching in a Head Start preschool. So that's where I'm at.
Thanks, Courtney. My name is Sarah Bueter. I am in the Maryknoll Lay Missioners class of 2023. I'm currently based from San Salvador in the small country of El Salvador. As this is just my first year, just finished my first year in mission. Last year, I was in a semi-rural ministry working with parishes and rural communities that surrounded the parish. This year, I'm in the urban capital and developing a ministry that looks pretty collaborative right now with the Franciscans and different religious congregations. We're looking to address some of the pressing needs of migration and climate change here, as well as incorporating a framework of nonviolence into the work. So excited to be here and hear all these voices as well. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Thomas Gould. My family was stationed in Oaxaca, Mexico between 2005 and 2008 when I was 7 to 11 years old. So I didn't do very much at all other than survive school in an all-Spanish school. But since returning to the United States and after graduating college, I did move on to the Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns, where as a communications manager, we do international advocacy on behalf of the Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers, the Maryknoll Sisters, and the Maryknoll Lay Missioners. And as a shameless plug, our website is maryknollogc.org, where you can sign up. We regularly send action alerts, articles, resources, and we keep people up to date on the social issues that we advocate for, which are peace and nonviolence, integral ecology, migrants and refugees, human rights broadly, economic justice, which is relevant to the Jubilee year, and lastly, transformation of hearts. We operate out of New York City at the UN and also in Washington, D.C. I am in Washington, D.C. right now.
Thank you, all of you. I think Sarah was actually featured through Maryknoll Office of Global Concerns recently, if my memory serves. We also have two folks that have sent us some video responses. So Justin and Abby Verizer are in Tanzania and hopefully sleeping right now because it's about midnight. They're children of missioners, and we wanted to share a couple of their little videos, starting with their introduction.
My name is Justin Verizer. My parents are Steve and Lois Verizer. They've been lay missionaries for quite some time, and we've been living in Tanzania basically our whole life since we were 2. Yeah.
I'm Abigail Verizer, and I'm 16 years old. We're twins. Yeah.
I think
Now that we know who we are, our panelists, where they come from, where they are now, I want to encourage all of you, if you have questions, to drop them in the chat. So those who know me, I could ask questions for the next 5 hours and keep us busy, but we would love to hear your questions as well. So please, if questions come up, feel free to put them in the chat. The first question that I have for all of you is, how do you think your mission experience has impacted your life? Or for Sarah, who's still there, how has it impacted so far in the last going on 2 years?
I'd say for me, and this is something that we talked about, like Courtney and Sam, the other kid in our group, when we were prepping for this. One of the things that we'd reflect on before we left was just that we very much believed it would continue to inform who we are and what we did long into the future. And that's continued to be true. I mean, as an educator in the United States, to have my foundations in another country, and to be pushed in the ways that I did, to learn to love better, to listen, truly to understand before I expect that reciprocation. But I move in the world differently because of it, and in better ways. I'm a better human because of my experience in Haiti and how much more love and compassion, and just drive to do good and to implement that in a world that is oftentimes super broken, to be within my circle of control and operate from that, not with despair for everything that I can't fix, but for hope for the things that I can make better with the time that I'm allowed. And I had that a little bit as a young person going into the world for the first time, but mission definitely instilled that. I met some incredible people who have continued to inform and bless my life just because I get to exist alongside them. And that's all a gift. As hard as it was sometimes, that is all a gift. And it continues, like I said, to inform how I am as a teacher, as a daughter, as a friend. And I am eternally grateful for the privilege it was to have served.
I think mission still affects me daily, just like my day-to-day actions, like being in Hogar, San Jose, and even La Casa de los Niños, just like accompaniment has been something that I've carried since Bolivia. It's something I struggled with before. I did a year of service post-college in Jamaica, and accompaniment was a huge pillar, a huge foundation of that program. And then I kind of struggled with that for a few years when I came back to the States. And then I really found it grounding in Bolivia and have really held on to that since then. And even in the work that I do now, I continue to work with children. And I feel like I live in a society where we're always pressured for to meet certain goals, certain objectives, to always be producing rather than just being. And I think my time in Bolivia, it was a struggle for me for many, like the first 2 years of just allowing myself to be in an experience and not necessarily always wanting to hit a certain goal or a certain objective. And so I think that's something that I really hold on to in my life today, in my work, and just allowing myself to slow down and to really process and to just be, not always going down a checklist of life. So.
One could say that I'm impacted by mission daily because I'm a currently missioner, but I think the question gets to the heart of the invitation to see our entire lives and the lives of every disciple as one of mission, and how that changes us to see mission not as an activity designated for a select few or something that's on the peripheries of the life of the church, but something that's at the heart of what it means to be part of the church and part of discipleship. So seeing it through our whole lives through a lens of mission opens us up to not only see mission as a certain activity, but the response to, with nonviolence, the promotion of justice. It gives us a lens from which, as Abby was saying, we can face the world with hope and not despair. And that impacts all of the decisions that we make on personal and interpersonal levels too.
Well, it's hard to follow all of that. That was all really lovely sentiments, and I fully want to echo them all. For me, it has impacted my life immensely. On the practical level, I wrote about it in my college applications. It gave me Spanish fluency, which was kind of a leg up in my education, and it connected me to a culture beyond the United States. But then also in deeper ways, it affected how I exist in the world. I'm hearing a little bit of a trend here, but between my current job and college, I also did a year of service, although much more locally within New York State, where I'm from. And then I here, obviously, working with the Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns. Um, I am doing the work I'm doing now, not because I put it on the resume. I didn't really contribute anything when 7 years old in Oaxaca, Mexico. But it still gave me a perspective and an understanding that allows me to do the work I'm doing now, and is possibly the only reason why I'm able to.
So many individual questions for each of you, but to keep it broad so it applies to everyone. I'm curious. So when I was overseas, coming back, one of the questions people always asked me was, well, what do you miss? And the first thing I always said was, well, the people, like the other things. It's the people that for me captured my heart, that still hold chunks of my heart. So I'm curious from all of you, even back to 7-year-old Thomas, if there is a person from the local community who's still got a piece of your heart that you might want to share with us in our space here today.
I think I can just quickly jump in. I had a classmate in my time who I've kept up with a little bit over the years, but we were very close, and it's one of the few good things that has come from Facebook, in my opinion, is the ability to stay in touch with her. And so she's someone I miss back home, or from Oaxaca.
I don't think it's wrong to call it home. I feel like there will always be a part of me that belongs to Haiti. And with how open Haiti and her people were to me, there's a part of me that will always belong to them. The person who immediately popped to mind when you're talking about that, Karen, her name is Madame Anise, and I talked about her last time when I was actively serving. She's actually the local voodoo priestess, and she's everybody's grandma down there. So the neighborhood where I worked in the primary school, it's about a 15-minute walk from our house. And if you want to talk about kindness and goodness and the best of us as human beings embodied in a person, it was her. She really did. She took care of kids who didn't have food. She took care of me when I got sick. She sent one of her several children to come drop stuff off. She was never too impatient to teach me how to cook her food, which was phenomenal, and just showed me love. And she always sent gifts for my parents, and invited me into her culture. And she explained voodoo in a way that made it what it actually is, which I think the westernized view of it is, it's so bastardized, and it's got a lot of the uglities that people, that's not even a word, but we're going to use it as one, ugliness that people like to throw at stuff like that. And really showed me a different side of Haiti that if I hadn't have gotten past myself and just said hi and gone to this glowing person. But I can't think of Haiti and not think of her and all of the kids that she impacted just by being loving. And it's really hard not to be able to go back and see her because I really want to. So, but Madame Anise for me is my Haitian mom, and I will love her forever for it.
I really don't think I can answer that question because as I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh, that person, oh, that person. And like, I just have so much love for so many people in Bolivia. I mean, my heart will always just belong to the kids that I worked with. And like, just being able to kind of, in a way, like grow up with them, because I was their person. I was their teacher for the 3 years that I was there. I went from grade to grade with them. And so there are a few kids that, I mean, if I could have put them in my suitcase and brought them with me, I would have. But I don't have an answer. Like, I just have so much love for so many people in Bolivia.
Cortney, you can be there for the 6-hour version of this when we go through all the people. Just keep going and going. A couple of you have mentioned, I know Abby and Cortney, you both named some struggles that came up in your time and that there were moments that were hard. And you were both in mission when I was working at Maryknoll, so I heard about some of those from you. And I'm curious from all of you if there were moments where you faced uncertainty or discomfort that you might want to share what that was like and how that impacted you. And as a reminder, drop those questions in the chat if you have them.
Well, one thing that was surprising to me, I mentioned that I'm from New York. I really missed evergreens and snow, and so I felt a pretty homesick for a good year and a half. And there was quite a long while that I hadn't made the choice myself, and I was like really eager to be back closer to my grandparents. Um, but I think midway through, there came an inflection point where I started to kind of really absorb the location as part of my identity and run with it to the point where I was really sad to go. In fact, it was quite difficult. We had a goodbye party, and we had invited a lot of people in the neighborhood, and we got wonderful gifts. I mean, it was so loving. Oh my goodness, I didn't think I'd be so emotional today. But by the time it was time to leave, we very much were sad to go.
I think for me, something that was difficult that, I mean, I think is like expected is, the first several months of moving to a new country. And I would like to think that I'm a pretty extroverted person, which I think was part of the struggle, moving to a country where I didn't know anyone, but I didn't know the language. I was really kind of starting from zero and not having a community of just like my family, my friends. Like, I had my Maryknoll community, but again, they're strangers too. And they're trying to, kind of test the waters, see who you are, figure things out. And so, and when I moved to Bolivia, I would say, and this is a generalization, but as a whole, I'd say Bolivians are a more reserved people initially. As soon as you're in their bubble, it's like a whole new world opens up. But I'd say initially, it's kind of a hard shell to crack. And so me going into this culture where I'm like, I'm ready to connect, I'm ready to, you know, have people, have friends. That didn't happen for like a year. And that was very difficult for me, especially, like I said, as extroverted as I am. I like longed for that connection. And it was easier for me to make that connection with other volunteers who were coming from different coming from different states. But I really like craved that connection to the people I was working with, the Bolivian people that I was working with. And so when I finally made that breakthrough, it was like the best moment ever because I finally felt seen, accepted, just part of the culture, part of the community. But yeah, that was really difficult for me for the first year.
I'll hit two parts with this. And, you know, one of the many things I'm grateful for Cortney for, aside from being able to maintain just one of the most genuine friendships of my young adult life, was similar. Like I called Marge Humphrey, I think it was like 4 months in, maybe not even. And for the usual, it set too high of expectations for myself. And I was literally in tears. And I was like, I'm not doing anything right. I feel like I'm just taking up space here. Everything could be going better. I shouldn't even be here. And I'm just like wasting people's time and I'm wasting resources and nothing. I don't have a ministry. And I love that you guys are like, yeah, you'll figure it out. Excuse me. And then I wasn't figuring it out. Or so I was saying. And March, just kind of in her gentle way, just kind of laughed. And she's like, okay, well, tell me about like what's a normal day for you. I was like, well, I go doing this and I do this and I do this and I don't understand this, but I'm trying to get the language down and I do this and I do this. And she's like, yeah, I think you're finding your ministry okay. So that kind of handled that, and it gave me a different perspective. And just talking about being gentle and like getting to call Cortney once a month, I think when we were first getting started was what we did. And we would talk for an hour and just catch up with each other and keep that connection. And like Janie was also in our class and she had the different perspective than we did. She was more into her adulthood and she had adult children, but getting to call her when she was in El Salvador, Pete was really hilarious. And he was my, I don't even remember the term, like lead. Yeah, the word's blanking. One of you's going to have to fill in for that. But basically the person I reported to when stuff was hitting the fan, which with my melodramatic self happened more often than I would like. But the other part of that, and the part that you do talk about before you go, is just not being there for the big moments with your family. Like that's one of the sacrifices you know you're going to make. And then until you live it, you really don't know how hard that can be. And I don't regret those choices. My nieces and nephews were all little when that happened. But one of the hardest things was the day after Thanksgiving, my first year in mission, my best friend of now 15 years, her boyfriend was shot and killed. And I couldn't be there with her in person to kind of just be present and to help pick up the pieces and to help her navigate that when you're in your young 20s and you're going through just an atrocity. And that was really hard. Fortunately, I have the family I do, and I was able to ask my brother to go be with her, but just not being there for those big moments is really hard. So while you're going through this amount of growth, the people you want to lean on the most can't be there with you, and you can't be there with them. So it is a sacrifice. It's one I still consider worth it. And she's okay now, and she's doing really well. But it's not without a price.
Thanks for sharing that, Abby. I would agree. So much about mission involves risk and uncertainty and being outside of your comfort zone. And I think especially as young people, we experience that as a young single woman in a foreign country, we experience mission differently. And there are different ways in which you can respond to that. You can either respond by leaning into that solitude and that loneliness, and it can become a source of empathy and understanding what other young people experience here who have limited job opportunities or limited access to education. Or you can turn it into something about yourself. And it oscillates, right? There are moments when it's a pity party for yourself, but there's also these really graceful moments when it can be something very connective. The risk and uncertainty is a way of growing in empathy with all those other people who you're serving with who are experiencing something very similar. It's not always as glamorous as it sounds, but it is possible.
I'm reflecting as you all are sharing about the time when I got lice overseas, which thankfully only happened once, and how that like moment of vulnerability was somewhat transformational in some of the relationships. Like, oh, you can get this thing too, and help to level the hierarchy that sometimes I felt like I was being placed into. It was, oh, you get this too. And the challenge was also, and we can't see it in your hair, because I worked in Cambodia, so they all had very dark hair, and they were like, we don't know how to pick nits out of your hair because they match your hair. So those challenging moments, I really resonate with what y'all are saying, how they can be a time for such growth. And I love how you highlighted, I feel like you all hit from, the going over to being there to coming back. It's life. Life is hard, and the hard stuff doesn't stop because you're somewhere else. One of the questions that came in that I feel like ties in with this was, what were some of your self-care practices while in mission, or while you are currently in mission, or what are some now? Because those sometimes can be the things that get us through those challenging times.
I have kind of a funny one, and I don't know if Juan is on this call or not. So my self-care involves movement, and like movement of my body and movement of my mouth. So I talk a lot. And so anytime I need to process, I often would call. I have an amazing support system here in the States of just best friends, Abby being one of them. Like she said, we would call and just kind of word vomit. And that was huge for my self-care. When COVID hit and we were kind of on lockdown in Cochabamba, there was one day where I just ran laps around our house, and Juan would time me, and I just needed to get all of this energy out because I was used to walking. That's something that I love so much about living in Cochabamba. I would walk everywhere, and during COVID, there was pretty heavy restrictions, and we were only allowed out once a week, and that was very difficult. And so I made do I felt like a dog, just like running laps in circles, but it worked. It made me feel better. But I think both of those, just being able to call people who know me, people who love me and support me, and being able to talk through whatever I needed to, and being able to continue to be a sounding board for my people that I continued to care for and love. And just always knowing when I needed to just get up and move, whether that was going for a walk or a run, dancing, whatever I needed to do. That's kind of how I knew I needed to take care of myself.
I think as a child and preteen, you have a little bit more leeway socially to act out. So I don't know if my coping mechanisms were the best ones to employ, and they're not ones I would encourage potential missioners to use. But I think kids will be kids, and as it turns out, the rules of soccer are really easy to get the hang of. So whether it's a ball or an empty soda bottle, there's a goal, and you try to get it in the goal. And so sometimes, like uh, uh, kids who you're with your other peers in school, in other social events, kids will see each other and they'll know what to do. Like social interaction comes, I think, a lot more easily when you're a kid. And I think that that was probably very liberating for me.
As a somatic stress person, I love all the ways you move to move your stress through. You all make me happy. So I am curious. Another one of the questions that came in was around being in mission with children or being a child in mission. The question says how the children adjusted or struggled adjusting, how they were impacted, what was it like for their education and social lives. So I'm curious, Thomas, if you might be able to speak to that, and then also have permission to call our friend Ann Berry into this conversation as well, who was a parent to kiddos in mission. So pass to the two of you, and the three of you that didn't take kids get to sit back for a moment.
Well, it certainly was an adjustment. I'm not going to lie. I came in speaking no Spanish and was thrown into an all Spanish speaking school. So there was a pretty steep learning curve. But midway through the first year, everything clicked almost at once. So it wasn't a gradual improvement. It was a couple semesters of failing and then several semesters of getting straight A's. There was no midpoint. Um, that, that might just be peculiar to me, but I think like kids are being thrown into the deep end, and it's probably one of the best times to do that because, in similarly to like being able to act out, like, having a little bit more like social freedom. Um, Childhood is a great time to be learning and doing new things. And it's, I think, the reason why so many people here in the United States, like, they'll send their kids to all sorts of camps, whatever might possibly stick. So I do think it's a challenge, but it's certainly worth it, and also one that is manageable. Like you, even when you feel like you're not progressing as you should, you do get over that hump. Um, and then relatedly, I think like that it is also very, very true that like kids will be happy with pretty little. I mean, um, we did not need a soccer ball in order to keep ourselves entertained, and being able to interact with other people my age in school, I think that became another means of connecting. And so uh, I suspect that my parents also benefited from having us there because it connected them to the community at my school, and then from there, they joined the Escuela para Padres, which was essentially a PTA. But that became a social group, and it became less of an individual matter, but like a family connection.
Thanks, Karen, for inviting me to join. And I will say I was in Mwanza, Tanzania with my husband, George, and our two children who were, let's see, they were 3 and 6 when we arrived, and then 6 and 9 when we, or 6.5 and 9.5 when we finished our contract there. And I mean, I agree definitely with what you said, Thomas, that kids, especially really young kids, like my kids were really young, can have fun with anything. So that was like easy. It didn't matter that much that we didn't have the same. And there were a lot of things we didn't have that my kids really enjoy now, where we live in North Carolina, like public libraries and playgrounds and things like that don't exist in Mwanza, and probably not in a lot of the other sites. But they were, equally happy to like watch the monkeys in our trees and play with very simple things. Like I remember an early video call we had with my mom where I was talking to her, and then I brought the phone out to the yard where my kids were playing and said like, oh, say hi, it's Nanny, say hi to Nanny. And they said hi. And then my mom told me much much later, when I saw them like playing in the dirt, I thought, oh no, my poor grandchildren, they had nothing but dirt to play with. But they were so happy, you know, just to play in the dirt with rocks and sticks. And so I think that was great. And I do think absolutely I totally agree, Thomas, that it's a really great connection point for me as a parent, that that was something I had in common with many Tanzanians that I met, with whom I had very little else in common, but being a parent was something we had in common, so we could talk about that, and that was connection. And it was really wonderful to have that way of connecting with other people in this like very human experience of like, I have a child and you have a child. So that was amazing. I mean, in terms of education, it was very different in Tanzania, in that way than like your family's experience in Oaxaca, because my children didn't go to a Tanzanian school because there was no school that would be appropriate, like mainly because of corporal punishment use being so common in Tanzania still, or at that time. So they went to an international school that was all in English. There were a lot of Tanzanian students, but the school was all in English. So they did not get like immersed in the language, which I was kind of disappointed about, but also it made it much easier for them because they didn't have to learn a new language first. So their educational experience, I think, was great. And yeah, that was just, I mean, and of course, it was a great opportunity to meet kids from Tanzania and lots of other countries through there. So I think it was very, very, very positive for my kids. And really the only thing that was a major difficulty was what Abby was mentioning before about missing major events with family and relatives, and just not getting to see our relatives and extended family very often. That was the only thing I think that was really hard for my kids that I know of.
Thanks, Anne, for being pulled in, and thanks, Thomas. We're actually going to go, there were a couple of other answers from Justin and Abby, the Verizon kids, about just how mission impacted them and the differences that they see between Tanzania and the US, which I think really tie in with that question around what it's like for families and kids. We'll pass back to our recording.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to go to college in the US, maybe somewhere near my grandparents. This is so I could like get a better education, because there's better education there. And then I think I'm gonna stay there for some time, but I would be open to moving back here sometime too.
Well, I've been thinking of being a doctor. I think I want to be something that would like help people. So like maybe a doctor. And I think I would like to work like somewhere like Tanzania or even other places that don't have many doctors, because I see how they need more doctors, how like some patients have to get clustered in rooms. So I would like to help the people who don't have as many doctors or anything else that's helpful. I'd like to help them out more. Yeah. There are a lot more like places like that have availability of resources, like shops and malls. Because here we have like the mall here, we think it's big and it's only one of it. But when you go to America, there's like such huge malls and there's a lot of them. So we're like kind of shocked. But also there's many, like all the roads in America are tarmac roads. Here there's some roads that are dirt roads. The place here is also nice. Like there's a lot of trees and there's monkeys. Like when people come here or new teachers that come to teach us, they always look at the monkeys and being surprised. And there's also lots of fruits. Like there in America, there are fruits like strawberries and stuff, but stuff like mangoes, like good mangoes, and bananas. When we go there, we start kind of like missing the fruits here. Yeah. Yeah, because here they're like fresh, like you can just get them off a tree. Also, the animals here, like the cows, chickens, you can just see them walking around and just all around, which is so different from America because when you go there, there's like no like animals. There's like squirrels and bunnies only. Yeah, there's like no cows and chickens, farm animals, until like you actually go to a farm.
I feel like hearing from me, from Justin, Abby, and Anne and Thomas, all these different perspectives is one of the magical things about Maryknoll Lay Missioners, because there are folks from kids to adults to retired folks all in one group, which really ties for me to one of the questions that just came in around what drew each of you to Maryknoll versus one of the other Catholic secular overseas volunteer organizations. What I just named is one of the things that was attractive to me, but I'm curious what it is for each of you that drew you here versus somewhere else.
I knew that I wanted to do overseas mission since I was 14. And my senior year of college, I really dove into the research to find an organization that I felt like I could align myself with. And I think by the end, it was close to 100 that I looked at. And I was deciding, I was determining between two organizations by the time that we went. I think it was the Lenten retreat for Maryknoll. And they were both really great organizations. And I sat down with Karen and had just a conversation about how I really didn't know what that discernment was going to look like and how that wasn't like me to not have a plan. And just talked it through, and Karen for all of her wisdom and her patience to really listen before responding, which is a skill that not everybody has. And it's one that I've certainly had to learn. It doesn't come to me as organically. But just talking about how Maryknoll wanted to work with me, but it needed to be right for me. And I was getting called no matter what. And so just to rest with that and to find peace with that. And, there wasn't pressure. It wasn't like they were trying to sell me a product or anything like that. And if I had a question, they answered me honestly. And the other organization, which was great, kept the cost of things in the dark until like the final phases of interviews. But Maryknoll never did that. They were honest about everything. They answered my questions with integrity. They didn't sugarcoat anything or hide anything. And it was just such a positive experience. And it was so involved. And I really had to reflect in the interview process, and the amount of work that went into it just to make sure that it was mutually beneficial was something that I really appreciated. And then going on the Lenten retreat and experiencing the Easter Triduum for the first time as a young adult was really cool. To meet other people who were in a similar discernment process. Those were the things that kind of solidified it, to learn more about the organization and just fall in love with it even more than I had. And also, I didn't find out about it until I was at a random mass in Texas when I'm from Wichita, Kansas. The one weekend I was down there, and there was a guest speaker at my brother's church. And I took that as a pretty big sign from God that I needed to consider that as an option. So that's what drew me to Maryknoll.
I didn't grow up knowing about Maryknoll. I didn't know about the Maryknoll magazine that was passed around through churches and parishes. I probably first learned about Maryknoll through Orbis Books. So shameless plug for Orbis Books. They produce wonderful, wonderful content. But I think what is particular about Maryknoll is in 2022, it adopted a focus of nonviolence. And as a young person who's looking at the world and seeing where the direction of mission is going, to have an organization that took on nonviolence as a central focus was innovative and also fitting with the times. Not just an organization that's, proclaiming the gospel, and not one that's just focusing on meeting basic human needs, but that's really looking at how do people exist in communities and how do we address questions of the social fabric, both at individual and structural levels, like what Thomas is doing in the Office for Global Concerns. And Maryknoll is able to hold both that kind of structural vision and the individual vision at once. So it was a good fit.
I think what drew me to Maryknoll, after I did my year of service in Jamaica, I kind of knew that that was something I was going, that kind of lifestyle, that desire to do mission was abroad specifically, was not just going to be done. And it wasn't. You know, I would say it was a long period of discernment, a few years. But what drew me specifically to Maryknoll was kind of the length. I wanted something longer because a year seems like a long time, but it went by so quickly. And right when I felt like I was like developing relationships, I was then leaving. And like I said before, you know, the first year in Bolivia was pretty, you know, there was a lot of highs, but also a lot of lows. And I didn't really feel like I kind of broke through to build my own community until after the first year. And so having a 3.5-year contract was actually what drew me most. And I think like I didn't know about Maryknoll at all growing up, had no idea. I think I had like a very specific Google search of like 3 to 5 year programs overseas, spiritual, Catholic, like it was just like the most ridiculous Google search. And Maryknoll was like one of the first things that popped up. And I remember reaching out and getting a call like within days. I can't even remember her name, and I know she doesn't work there anymore. But just I remember being on the phone and kind of like what Abby said, like it wasn't a sales pitch. It was just like, hey, if you want to know more, like let's chat and see if this is a good fit for us and for you. And then eventually when I, you know, went in for in-person interviews, it didn't feel like an interview. It felt like a conversation with a friend. And I have interviewed with at that time with other organizations where I just very much felt like a number, just kind of not a face to be seen. Just you're another number in the system. Great. We want you, push her along. And I did not get that. I didn't get that vibe at all with Maryknoll. I really felt like my concerns, my beliefs, everything about me was seen, was heard, was validated. And it has always continued to be that way. So.
We can't let the moment pass to give a shout out that there still is a Holy Week retreat. I believe it's happening in El Paso. I'm looking at Elvira. So if you know anyone in your life who might need that discernment space that Abby just named, that's still taking place every year. One of the other questions that came through was around, Elvira, I believe is the one who put this in. Why do you think that young people are not signing up in the numbers that they were in the past? Or what can Maryknoll Lay Missioners do to better reach the demographic? Each of your classes, I think you were the young ones in your class, and there may have been a significant age range or distance between the next youngest. So we would love your wisdom. And Thomas, you are welcome to weigh in as well, because you are in that age range and working with those people through all the work with Maryknoll Office of Global Concerns.
I don't know that I don't think there's a catch-all answer for this. And it's hard. I mean, that was the only thing that God didn't change in my plan and timeline from being 14. I followed through on that. And I just knew that's what I wanted, and I went after it. And how many 14-year-olds in the world know that, yeah, that seems like a great idea right out of college when you're 22 and still figuring everything out. I think on the practical side of things, and I don't necessarily have an answer for how you could fix it, but the world's a really scary place right now for a lot of people. And financial security is something that this next generation and the ones following them at least in the United States, are wanting to make sure they have security in, because they're looking ahead and they're not going to have the things that their parents and grandparents have. They're not going to have the securities in place like that. And there are places in the world that are literally burning and that are broken. And I think, there's a lot of fires as it is, whether literal or not, that are needing to be put out here. But I think just advocating for those opportunities. And I don't know if it's still in place, but when I first started looking at it, I believe if you had the language for it, there was a shorter service option, which I think for some people, that is 3.5 years is a lot for a lot of people. I think that takes a very unique person to do. And I had to step away for family reasons, so I ended my contract early, a year early, but that's to take care of family. I would have loved to have followed that through, but I don't know. I think those opportunities too, that you guys do where people go, I think it's for like a month and get to visit some of the sites where Maryknoll Lay Missioners are at, is a good thing. So promoting that, but I think it would be all in the promotion, but I don't know that there's a set answer, like I said.
I agree 100% with everything Abby said. I do think, like, I was in the minority. I was maybe the oddball, wanting a longer program, but I do think even where I am now, like 3.5 years, I have no clue where I'm going to be in 3.5 years. Like, I have no idea, especially now, what life looks like in 3.5 years, which is intimidating. And I think, especially as a young person, I mean, that can be a great, incredible opportunity. But again, especially if you've never done something like this before, it's like it can be very overwhelming. It's kind of a huge thing to kind of picture, like, I'm going to leave my life and everything and everyone I've ever known for 3.5 years. And so I do think kind of shorter opportunities could be beneficial. And I also think church has changed. I think there can be kind of a stigma, for better, for worse, with the Catholic Church in a lot of different religions. And I think Maryknoll has done a beautiful job at kind of staying with the times, kind of like Sarah talked about, incorporating nonviolence. But I do think, I mean, like, church has changed drastically for me alone in the last 4 or 5 years. My spirituality looks a lot different. And so I think just kind of opening doors. And I know when I was kind of on my way out of Bolivia and my Maryknoll experience, those conversations were happening about opening doors to not just strictly Catholics. But I do think that might be something that holds a lot of people back of, religion and church. It's just, it's hard. It's different now. So I think those are some things.
Building on what Cortney said, I remember when I had discerned Maryknoll and I was finishing up a master's program at a Methodist university, and people would say, "Sarah, what are you doing on graduation?" And I wouldn't want to say I'm doing missionary work, because that carried so much connotations and baggage, not only within the Catholic Church, but within the larger umbrella of Christianity. So I'd say, I'm joining Maryknoll, and they're like, "Oh, she's the Catholic, so I don't know what that means, but applause. Good job, Sarah, you have a job." So there is this story of mission that we can't disassociate from, and nor should we. I think one of the challenges that we feel in the El Salvador community is, how do we breathe life into mission without making it about, oh, we have low numbers. How do we act out of self-preservation, right? Because the fact that young people still have desires to serve is something that we're all aware of. But if we say it has to look one way, it has to look like our way of doing things, then we've again lost that spirit. What we can do in Maryknoll is continue to reflect how what we do can then expand how people view their own lives in the US, young people's lives in the US. can be ones of mission from where they are. It doesn't have to mean traveling to another country or engaging in multicultural mission in another place. It happens where you are. And we can witness to that and share that with other people too. So we can let go of that idea sometimes of what it means to be doing, the real thing. And that might also broaden up and create a larger invitation for people to join Maryknoll as well.
The recruitment team is going to be reaching out to all of you for your ideas now. I'm curious, and if you have other questions, folks, please keep putting them in the chat, about what is a story that sort of stands out to you from one of your experiences in mission. So it can be something that was joyful, it can be something that was hilarious. I'll give you a chance to think. One that sort of popped into my mind was I will always remember going out to sort of a rural area in Cambodia with some of our field workers. And when I was with them, usually it was just about documenting what they did and getting to take pictures to then share those stories with a broader community. And I remember we went to this village, and my Khmer was not perfect. It will never be perfect, but I was at about a fourth grade level, and I felt pretty confident in my ability to communicate. And so I started talking with one of the grandmas, the yays of the community. And she looks at my coworker and goes, "I need you to translate. I don't speak English." And I was like, I was speaking Khmer, but apparently my accent's a lot worse than I thought it was. So from that point forward, my coworker would always talk about how she spoke. What did she say? She spoke 4 different languages. She spoke English, she spoke Khmer, she spoke Cambodian Sign Language, and she spoke Karen Khmer. So she just always enjoyed telling everybody how that was one of her skill sets and languages she knew. Hopefully that gave you all some time to think. Would love to hear your stories.
I just shared this with my juniors, and they've been making fun of me all week. And I'm sure when I come back on Monday, because I've been gone for basketball tournament, there's possibly going to be a crocheted chicken on my desk. Now, let me tell you why. I think I was a year and a half in, and so I similarly felt confident in my Creole. And one of the girls came in to Mercy Beyond Borders, and I was sitting at my desk running analytics, and she's like, "Hi, I'm here for," and okay, so the word, she said ampoule, which means light bulb, and I thought she said yonpoule, which means a chicken. And I looked at her and I was like, "You're joking, right? We don't have chickens here." And so I'm not arguing, but not understanding her for 5 minutes. And she's trying not to laugh because respect is a big thing for them. She's like, pool. And like, she's frustrated and I'm frustrated because I can't understand her. And I said, "Let's just stop." So we went to Gina. Gina is brilliant. She is Haitian herself, but speaks way better English than I do Creole, even after all these years. And so we went up to her, and she was working on something else. I was trying not to bother her. And I said in Creole, I said in English, "Do we have chickens here?" And Gina's like, "What do you mean? No, we don't have chickens here." I said, "She's asking for a chicken." And Gina goes, looks at the girl and asks in Creole, and the girl says, and she goes, "Abby, she's asking for a light bulb." And then the girls thought that was hilarious because Gina translated for all of the girls in the room. So the next day, they elected themselves to go buy a chicken from one of the dads of the girls, and they named the chicken Light Bulb. So, yeah. So I got dogged for a little bit for that. It's one of the funniest stories that I have. And then on pool, went to a local family, and they were able to eat chicken for the night. So I am very sure my kids, my current teenage students, are going to mess with me for the rest of the semester, which is fine. But you get humbled quite a bit, and that's okay. As long as you can laugh, you're fine.
Don't want to cut anyone out. Sarah, Courtney, Thomas, story.
Sure. I think I collect stories on a daily basis here. But one of the things is you always have to laugh at yourself. If you don't have the ability to laugh at yourself, chances are you won't make it very long in really uncomfortable situations that mission requires. But just as a story of what it's like to be in mission in El Salvador is that particularly as a young woman, I'm afforded a certain kind of confidence with women that is often not takes longer for clerics or for men to achieve. So there's something really particular about just in general being out in the rural villages and spending evenings long into the night talking with women who normally don't have confidence in a certain and in this kind of capacity, someone who's just listening for hours on end. And those kinds of conversations are just these moments when you're almost outside of your body looking down and just trying to pinch yourself. And then usually there's something funny that happens and you end up, bruised or on the ground or in the wrong bus going the wrong direction or something's bitten you and you end up in well, my family's on here. I can't tell too many bad stories, but it is about humor and listening. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I have a story necessarily, but I did feel very close to something that the Verisers said, which was that um, what they talked about is how much they miss the food when they're not there. And that is very much the case. Like certainly immediately after, it was like a very intense kind of need for the local cuisine. Um, but some of my favorite things, highlights of my day would be uh, right outside of right outside of the school and outside of the church. There'd always be, a very well placed food stand, usually with mangoes or any kind of fruit. And they would add the chili powder and a bunch of like probably very bad for you like chemicals, but they were so delicious. And so uh, my parents have a photo of me and my sister sharing one of these. It's just I guess you call it a watercress on a stick covered in like salsa, like the Valentina sauce, if that means anything to you. So that was just a very intense kind of memory.
I think one of my most ridiculous adventures was, like I said, once I was able to make Bolivian friends, one of my friends and I decided to take a weekend trip, just really not planned at all. And it ended up being a weekend that was the holiday. So we didn't have any foresight in mind to plan where we were going to stay. We were like, oh, we'll just get a hostel. Hotels did not exist where we were going. But we were like, we'll get a hostel. We'll find somewhere when we arrive. And when we arrived, everywhere was booked. There was nowhere for us to stay. And so then we spent the evening going door to door and knocking on strangers' doors. And we started with the churches and weren't really welcome. And then we just were sitting on a bench and we both agreed that we were going to end up taking turns sleeping on this bench in this plaza. And we would just make it through the night and then do our adventure. And then someone, this Bolivian woman, overheard us talking. She goes, "There's no way you were sleeping on this bench." And then they invited us in and we ended up sleeping in their garage. And the whole time I'm thinking my mom would totally kill me if she knew what I was doing and where I was sleeping. These people could just lock me up in their garage, never see me again, but just having, I don't know, faith in people, and people have good hearts and trust. And now my mom can laugh about it because I'm alive and I'm well. But yeah, some of those stories were not shared until I returned stateside.
I suspect that all of us have those that went as young people. I think what really strikes me in listening to each of you share is we were all in different countries, we were all received in different communities. And just the example of hospitality, of welcome, of how you treat strangers among you and people who are different and come from a different culture is just, in my experience, it was wherever I went, just something that we can really learn from in this country, and the way that we welcome someone and let them sleep in our garage because we just overheard them saying they didn't have somewhere to sleep. So I'm just very struck by that in this moment in time and how we can learn from that. There was another question that came in the chat. What do you think some of the special things that, what do you think are some of the special things that young people contribute to MKLM?
I want to preface this by saying there were a lot of great adults going into mission at the same time. Court and I mean, we were adults, we were young adults, but I mean, like, brain fully developed adults, which Cortney was. She was, she was
Like
at
real
that
adults, responsible adults, not me.
adultier adults, we'll say. But I think sometimes one of the pitfalls we can get into the older we get is that we don't slow down enough to recognize that the world is a lot bigger than us. One of my favorite proverbs from Haiti is "Tout ça pas connaître pique paseo," which means all that you don't know is bigger than you. I think young people, because, you know, if they're coming out of college, if they're coming out of the young 20s and they're very new to being an adult and finding their way in the world, you have, in a lot of ways where it counts, where you're learning a little bit more humility to ask questions, to be perceptive to what people tell you, to listen when locals are saying this is what's going on, which is another thing that I loved about Maryknoll. It wasn't us starting our own things for our own glory. It was going into these communities that are welcoming you and sitting down and listening. You're not saying, here's the problems that I see, here's how you're going to fix it. It's, well, talk to me about it. What do you need to be able to live more independently and to have a better quality of life? And also, who's your family and who are your kids, and how lucky I am to be a part of that and to sit with you, like people have talked about in this, just that ministry of presence. And I think, you know, anybody's funny at any age. Like, some of my favorite Haitians were 86-year-old men with like 7 teeth who would be drinking a Prestige, which is Haitian beer, at 9 o'clock in the morning, asking me what I was going to teach the kids today. But for young people, it's bringing that. It's being able to relate, I think, to a lot of different age groups with that and bringing different ideas. And I don't know, every age group brings their own set of things because every age group has been informed by something. And I think for young people, it's not that it's better or worse energy, it's just different. And I think it's needed in the world, just like it is for the people in their 50s and 40s and 60s and 70s. I think Marilyn and Kevin were in their 70s, and they definitely had some funny energy. So that's what I would say young people contribute, is just a really good energy.
To build off of that, I would just say, like, there's a different kind of just life to young adults, to young people, to children, that can be kind of infectious. And so when you're going into a community of like put together adults, like more, I still sometimes I'm like, I'm not a real adult. Like, who's allowing me to make these decisions? Like, ice cream for dinner sounds great. But I think just like, there's just like this youthfulness, this excitement, this playfulness that I think we can all get wrapped up in the seriousness of church and mission. But we forget that like mission is fun. Like, there is so much joy. And like, I feel like as we get older, sometimes we can get bogged down. And I feel that even now, like I can get so caught up in like the kind of the heaviness of it all. But I think that's like what I loved. It was being able to kind of go into a community, and I was the youngest one in the Maryknoll community in Bolivia at that time. And just feeling like I had this just excitement, hope, like I wanted to bring this like kind of breath of fresh air of like this is fun. Like, let's remember that we're all here to like live life and live life to the fullest. And so I think that is what, young adults I hope, continue to bring into mission today.
I love this question because there's a piece of what does it mean to Maryknoll and how do we impact the Maryknoll community, and then what does it mean to the community where we're serving. To Maryknoll, we're also bringing this new energy with new eyes and new joy and humor and the ability to make mistakes and grow from them. And then also to the communities that we serve in El Salvador, we have a lot of machismo. There's a lot of people who decide what women can and can't do, or what they can wear and what they can't wear, and how they need to appear in the church, not only within their physical bodies, but how they need to act and behave. So to come in as a young woman, that models something for a whole generation of young women and girls who have been told a different thing, told what they can or can't do. And that requires us as young women just being our very own selves. And that is energizing, not only for the Maryknollers in the community and the organization that we represent, but the people who we're serving. We can impact that as well.
I don't know if I'm able to answer that question on account of not being a young adult and my parents being, old enough to have children at the time that they were there. But I will contribute something that I think made their experience different, which was that I remember going to a lot of parties, and by which I mean, um, you know, uh, graduation, like any kind of community parties. Not to say that uh, older people wouldn't be, but my parents would stay up much longer than past some other bedtimes. And so I just it was very funny to me years later, but also many years ago. I was old enough to look back on that, and I asked my parents a question, which now in retrospect seems pretty silly. But my question was, okay, so you were there on mission. What was the point of going to all those parties? It took me a while to realize, oh wait, no, like being part of a community and enjoying like being at a party is valuable in of itself. And I think we buy in too much into the um, kind of the American model of like you're there to exchange a good for a service, and the kind of transactionality of it all. Um, my parents being young and able to stay up late, and which they did quite a lot, like going to a lot of different social functions, um, did contribute more to the sense of solidarity rather than the kind of the all the negative aspects commonly associated with missionary work.
Thomas, I also just want to say, like, your opinion, what you share, is just so valid, because the Verizers were in Abby's and my class. And when I tell you, they were the life of the party, like they were the joy, especially after like long days of orientation where all of us were kind of going insane. Like the Verizor kids, I'm like, where are the kids? Like, I need to hang out with the kids. Like, I need that energy. So like what you're sharing, like you were just as needed as any young adult in these cases.
100%. Those kids, and it's, God, I'm going to sound like such an adultier adult now, but they've grown up so much. And I know they're both taller than us now, which is just not okay. No, but it was, and getting to see them and their perspective was just also just as valid and just as unique. And getting us to play games, and Halloween was a blast because of them, and the world through their eyes was just, I think it offered a purity that genuinely added something and added excitement to everybody no matter what age we were. But I echo that 100%. Kids in mission are just as incredible and are their own unique gifts to everything that can happen within the Maryknoll Lay Missioner communities. So, any perspective, just, I don't know, because growing up in it has to be its own kind of thing, and to see how well you've developed and everything that you've got your hands in, I think that worldview is incredible, as hard as it was that first year for you, learning that language. It's very impressive.
Sharing one of the things I was thinking about, I was thinking, how would I answer this question? And when I was in Cambodia, I was about the average age of Cambodians, like the median age of Cambodians, because it was a very young population. And I felt like that was such an advantage because my coworkers, we were all in the same age group. And it gave me an ability to sort of be in the local community in ways that my coworkers who were retirees had a harder time entering in, because just the respect that was given to elders, you weren't going to be hanging out with them. But I was the same age as my coworkers. And so I could then take the wisdom that I learned from that local community and bring it back to MKLM, which I felt was a huge advantage at the time. Even though I was not the one out all night, I loved the fact it was a culture that I could go to bed at 8 o'clock at night and be up at 4 a.m. And it was just wonderful. It was my happy place. So as we come to the end of our time, just checking our time real quickly, I'm wondering if you just have a word or a sentence from each of you as to what your advice would be for someone who's considering coming to mission.
Trust the process. Discern, like, don't jump into it, but just trust the process and trust the people who know you best, and surround yourself with those people that you can kind of go to for a sounding board or advice. But throughout everything, just trust the process and yourself.
It's your life, and we only get one of them. And if you feel that the fire for doing this life of work, because it really is not for everybody, but if you feel that the fire for this work is bigger than the fears, then go for it. You get one life. And sometimes you're not always going to have an answer. But like Cortney said, trust it. Do your due diligence and trust that you're going to be okay.
It's important to laugh at yourself along the way.
I think, and I take my advice for what it's worth, but I expect to change or to be changed by the experience, or be open to that kind of change, because you are going in to be a positive contribution to a community, but that community is also positively influencing you, and it works both ways.
I share my gratitude before I pass this back to Elvira, to each of you for sharing. It's been lovely just to be back in the Maryknoll community again. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you. And I will pass back over to Elvira.
Oh my goodness. Okay, those of you who don't know me, I'm about to cry. I was going to try not to. No, but it's just, my heart is so full of gratitude and awe and amazement at the depth of your experience and your ability to share that and to continue living it. It's so obvious from your sharings. And so my role right now is just to say thank you so much to all of you, our panelists, and Abby, and now I'm going to blank out on his name because I've got myself worked up here, the Versayers as well. Thank you, Karen, for facilitating our conversation today as well. thank you to everyone who came, and I hope that we're going to have more conversations like this, that we need to draw the fruit that has come forth from the young people in Maryknoll Lay Missioners. And so, of course, I would not do better than being able to quote something from Pope Francis, as he reminds us, and actually I ran to get this in the middle of our conversation because I happened to be reading something from Pope Francis this morning, and then as you all spoke, it came to my mind. He shares, and this is again dedicated to what you have represented here today for Maryknoll Lay Missioners. My mission of being in the heart of the people is not just a part of my life or a badge I take off. It is not an extra or just another moment in life. Instead, it is something I cannot uproot from my being without destroying my very self. I am a mission on this earth. And I think of that, of each one of you who has shared today. I am here in this world, and we have to regard ourselves as sealed, even branded, by this mission of bringing light, blessing, enlivening, raising up, healing, and freeing. And I can tell from your sharing that you continue to do that in your everyday lives where you are even now in mission. And so thank you so much. And I do invite all of you and everyone else here to join us in our continuing celebration of mission through Maryknoll Lay Missioners. We will be culminating in an in-person celebration. So I can't imagine what that will be like if today, I mean, look at me. But I know that all of you have also the same excitement and energy to share mission with colleagues and with, our future and present and past. So on August 14th through the 17th, we have the opportunity to gather at Maryknoll, New York. There will be space for 80 individuals, so space is limited. But as of this week, by the end of this Friday, we should have the registration up on the website. Please sign up and let us know how many are coming, because if more than 80 show up, we will be looking for the facility to accommodate more people. But for now, looking forward to being able to host this. Our next event or theme that we would be able to do before August, we will be focusing on our donors, recognizing that everything that we do is not possible without the support of family, friends, and those who support this mission, which is God's mission, and that we all have said yes in one way or another. So please be on the lookout for the announcement about when we will be able to celebrate that event. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your day or evening, I know.